Do you have a desire to learn Greek but you struggle with the day-to-day willpower to get it done? Well, you're not the only one. In this video, we're going to talk about why that is and also what you can do about it as well. Hi, I'm Daryl Burling from Master New Testament Greek, and I help people like you with the tools, habits, and system to master the Greek of the New Testament. If you want to know the Word of God in the original language, then I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and hit the notify bell so that you're notified when new videos are released. So you want to learn biblical Greek, but you struggle with just the desire to do it, right? The day-to-day desire is weak. You know this is a good outcome to get, but when you come to do it in the morning, it just seems too hard. It just seems too difficult. Maybe you don't get to it at the morning at all. Maybe it's just something you forget. Whatever it is, there's a gap between that ultimate desire you have to read the New Testament in Greek and the day-to-day work needed to do it. Well, you're not the only one that this has happened to before, and there is a way to overcome it. And in this video, we're going to talk about just a handful of ways that we can do that. On a day-by-day basis, we are largely driven by how we feel. Now, there are some people who have an idea that this is actually wrong, right? But the problem is not so much that it's wrong to be driven by our feelings, but that our feelings are corrupted. That's the problem. And so the problem here then means that we have these feelings of, I don't feel like doing this right now. How do I overcome this feeling in the moment? Here's what's going on. Your desire, your feelings, because they change on a day-by-day basis, to overcome that change, you need to exert decision-making ability, agency, your determination, whatever it is, to get the job done. And so you know what you need to do, but it's just exercising that determination to do it. And that's what people really struggle with. But there are some things that we can do to overcome that, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. And really, the outcome that we're aiming for here is that we want to make this an automated behavior, something that we do very naturally without thinking about it, without any concern about how we feel. We really want to make this into a habit, okay? Let's talk about how to do that in a very practical sense. There are really three basic elements of creating a habit, and they are context, repetition, and reward. And ultimately, of these three things, you could argue that in many ways, the context is perhaps one of the most important elements of this. And by context, what we mean is your environment, which is really everything except you. Now, because we're talking about everything other than you, we're not talking so much about changing something inside. We're focused on outside things. And really, we're going to classify these in two ways. There are things that cause friction, things that prevent us or restrain us from doing what we want to do. And there are things that are drivers, things that draw us toward doing the things that we want to do. And what we want to do in our environment is take both of these things into account. We want to get rid of the things that are frictional, the things that take us away or restrain us from doing what we want to do. And we want to put in place the things around us that are going to drive us toward the behavior that we want to do. And again, what we're doing here is we're taking our desire to read biblical Greek, and we're matching that together very practically with an environment that is conducive to that and that doesn't draw us away from it. This is very simple, basic stuff, but it's very practical and very actionable. And this has implications not only for putting in place good habits, but also for taking away bad habits. Because just like we are restrained in good habits by frictional elements, so too we can use friction or introduce friction to prevent us from engaging in bad habits. Maybe I'm eating too many carbs, for instance. Well, one way to increase friction is to simply remove carbohydrates from my pantry. When I go looking for food, there's just nothing there to eat that drives, that's going to help me. So I have to go to the store if I want carbohydrate. Now, when it comes to elements of friction, things that restrain us, there are a number of categories of these. And probably one of the most important is proximity. The more work you have to do to engage in something, and the further you have to go to engage in something, then the more difficult it's going to be for you to engage in the way that you want to engage. So you want to make sure that your environment puts the things that you want close at hand. Now, when it comes to your Greek, this may be things like, maybe there's a bookshelf near where you do your regular Bible reading. Or maybe you want to introduce a bookshelf on the desk or table where you do your Bible reading so that you see there and it's just a one-handed reach to get your Greek New Testament or your Greek grammar or your worksheets or whatever it is that you're working through in order to help you to read biblical Greek. But proximity is a critical element of getting this right. The further away you have to go to get your resources and to get the things that you need to do the Greek, then the harder it's going to be. So reduce the friction by bringing those things close so that they're right there at hand. Now, there's a second benefit of this proximity, and that is on the flip side, not so much friction, but now as a driver. Now, because these things are near you, you see them, and the things that you see provide a huge cue to actually going and doing things. So by bringing those books near you, you do two things. First of all, you eliminate the friction of having to go and get them, and you introduce the driver of having this visual cue to encourage you to read biblical Greek. Another thing that sometimes draws us away, that causes friction for us, are distractions. Maybe this is your phone beeping, maybe this is your computer giving you notifications, maybe it's just shiny object syndrome. For me personally, I don't do my quiet time in front of the computer because the computer is a big distraction for me. It's too easy to open apps and look at other things. My mind starts to wander and I go do that, and then of course I don't go back to my Bible reading. And so I make sure that I eliminate distractions as best I can before I start my devotional time, and in my devotional time, that's where I'm doing my biblical Greek. So then one of the things we can do to reduce the friction that prevents us from installing habits and doing habits is simply to eliminate distractions. And this is actually another good reason to have a look at doing your Greek first thing in the morning. In fact, getting up a little earlier in the morning to do this, because when you do that, normally the house is quieter. Normally there are not the same people around. They don't need things. You can just simply settle down and largely be guaranteed of being able to work for a certain amount of time without anybody coming and talking to you, emails arriving, or any of those kind of things. So mornings are a great time to allow you to work without distractions. So I would encourage you to do that. And we've talked a little bit about mornings in the past, so I'm going to leave you to look that up. Now, in terms of drivers, I've already mentioned one, and that is both proximity and visual, right? So if something is nearby, it's going to make you more likely to pick it up and use it. If something is visually right there in front of you, it's going to be a visual incentive for you to go and actually do that, pick it up, work with it. And so what I want to encourage you to do is the night before you start your devotional time, before you start your Greek time, whatever it is, you want to set up your environment so that those things are right there, ready to go. This then becomes a driver. It's going to encourage you and drive you to actually work in the text because you've already planned it that way and it's right there, ready to go. Now, another environmental factor is social context. And I think I mentioned this before, but with social context, there are going to be people around you often who don't see the value in biblical Greek. For instance, I once told somebody, hey, I'm learning the biblical languages, and they looked at me and said, wouldn't it just be easy to read it in English? And of course, that was not an encouragement to carry on. Unfortunately, that person didn't really, I wasn't drawn to the opinions of that person very much, so it didn't really hit me very strongly, and my motivation was stronger than with that person. But if you imagine going to a church or being in an environment where nobody around you is learning biblical Greek or interested in biblical Greek, then it's going to be very hard to keep going. So social context is a big factor as well. So having people around you who detract from that is going to be a cause of friction. It's going to be an environmental thing that's going to draw you away from the study of Greek. On the other hand, if you're part of a community that draws you in continually, then this is going to be a real blessing to you, and this is going to encourage you and drive you, particularly if what you're seeing is over and over and over again, people doing things, accomplishing things, getting through particular stages and phases, people who are actually learning to read the New Testament more fully. This is a huge encouragement to you then to be able to read the Greek of the New Testament. And so social context is a huge element when it comes to learning to read the New Testament as well. Now, repetition is a second element of reading or of building habits that is really helpful. So the first time you set up the environment, for instance, for yourself, you have to be very deliberate about doing that. Then you come to it the next day, you're still, even though the environment is set up, it's still going to mean you still have to encourage yourself, or still have to, there's still a little bit of an element of forcing yourself into this. I don't really feel like doing this. So repetition is important because it's going to help you continue to go through this day after day. As you continue to repeat this, it gets easier. There's less willpower required on a day-by-day basis. Yes, there's still willpower required on day 1, but by day 10, by day 20, and in fact, put it this way, the more visual cues, the more proximity, the more environmental change that you can introduce, the less time it will take for that repetition to feel natural. So what you want to do is set up your environment well and then repeatedly use that environment for biblical Greek. And that way it's going to decrease the friction, decrease the likelihood that you don't do those things. And so this means that it's going to take less time for you to form this as an actual habit. Now that brings me to another point, and that is that if you miss a day or two here and there, if you miss an occasional day and you go back to it pretty soon after, you're not going to lose much. The habit formation is not, you're not set back right back to the beginning because you miss a day. You can miss a couple of days, and as long as you go back to it, the habit building will continue pretty much from where it left off. If you take a couple of weeks off, of course, that's going to be different. But if you miss a day here and there, it's not that big a deal. So if you miss a day, don't worry about it. Just go back to it. Don't give up. That's the key thing. If you miss a day, don't say, well, the pattern's broken, I can't do this anymore. Don't give up. Go back to it. Set up again the next day. Add just a little more willpower and a little more environmental setup for the next day, and go back to it again and make sure you get back on the wagon, so to speak. Now, the other thing that's really important in terms of building a habit is the reward. And let me tell you this, the reward for the work you do in Greek is not the ability to pass words. It's not the ability to identify syntactical forms. The reward you get is reading the text, being able to look at the Word of God in the original language and understand it. That is the reward, right? And so for that reason, whenever you come into that environment, into that time where you're working on your Greek, you want to make sure you receive some of that reward for yourself. Okay, so you want to be doing things like working on your memory, working on your vocab, working on paradigms. You want to do those things. You want to practice your passing, but those things are only a means to an end. You want to include, in every time you sit down for a serious time in Greek, you want to do some translation. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's one sentence, one verse, some translation is going to be really helpful because that is the reward that you're looking for from the work in Greek. Now, that doesn't mean to say that every single time you do a little bit of translation, your mind is altered and you're buzzing out about it, right? But sometimes you will find things there and you'll go, wow, this is amazing. And it's those intermittent rewards that are actually the thing that makes a huge difference. In fact, if you're getting the same reward every time, the chances are that it wouldn't stick the same. But the intermittent reward seems to be actually a big driver. So I want to encourage you, even if you're not getting huge amounts out of it every time, to keep going back to it. The repetition and that consistency and that reward together is going to help you to build that habit. Again, don't worry if you miss a day, you can pick it up the next day, no problem. Just make sure you set up your environment and do it again so that you continue to build that habit. And then the key thing is, in each time you're spending time in the Greek, make sure you do just a little bit of translation. Now, if you can read more than one verse, do it. In fact, I encourage you, as you get more competent in Greek, to actually spend specific amounts of time reading. So I would say 15 minutes would be a kind of or even 10 minutes would be a baseline, a minimum. But give yourself 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Increase that as you have opportunity. Like on the weekends, maybe you can increase that to an hour. Whatever it is, particularly at the earlier stages, it's really important that you get the reward for the effort that you've put in. And that reward is not the passing practice. It's not the paradigms. It's not knowing how to, understand a form or knowing the syntactical categories. The reward is being able to read the New Testament in Greek with understanding. So keep working day by day on translating just a little bit of the Bible, and you will get some of that reward for yourself, and that will help the habit stick. So let me ask you this question. As you think about a habit, as if you've formed a habit, if you've been involved in habit building around particularly around Greek. What are some of the drivers that you've found that have been really helpful, and what are some of the hindrances that you've been able to eliminate? Leave a comment in the comment section below, and I look forward to hearing from and learning from you in there as well. If you're interested in learning more about Biblical Greek and about Master New Testament Greek, I encourage you to go pick up my free roadmap to mastery at masterntgreek.com/roadmap, and you can start on your path to mastery today. But again, thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notify bell. Don't miss out on any more videos. I look forward to serving you and seeing you in the next video. We'll see you then.